honor to be here. I've popped in and out of a few of these meetings and appreciate the contribution to the conversation that's going on at all times. I don't think anybody knows me, which is great. I prefer it that way. But I grew up in a Messianic congregation. My parents were saved in the Jesus Revolution in California with Chuck Smith. In fact, I got my first spanking at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, in the nursery by a volunteer male named Wally, who gave me back to my dad and said, "Sorry, sir, we had to spank him." And my dad said he had it coming. So that was my indoctrination, and went on to get to help lead worship with Chuck Smith on and prophecy nights. They had prophecy conferences and fun stuff like that. Um, and then I went into being a pastor for 25 years at a mega church in Southern California. And I was the token Jew on staff. And so people would always ask me, what does this mean in Hebrew? And what's going on with this passage that I don't know about? And so that was fun. But if you were asked my dad is a Jew from Brooklyn, New York. And when they made the move from New York to California, he said he went from a predominantly Jewish neighborhood to a not so predominantly Jewish neighborhood. And he was playing marbles with his friend named Buddy. You guys remember marbles? You kind of flick the marbles. And his friend Buddy leaned down to hit the marble, and out from his shirt popped out a little chain. And at the end of the chain was a crucifix with a little man on it. And my dad asked Buddy, "What is that?" And he said, "It's a cross." And my dad still didn't know what that meant. He said, "It's Jesus." And my dad still didn't know, but he went home to his Jewish mother and said, "I want one of those necklaces like Buddy." And he would say that after she picked herself up off the floor, uh, she said to him, "He's not for you." And that is what our people have been told for generations now, that Jesus is not for you. And so he grew up thinking, well, that's for them, and he's not for us. And really, his life turned around when it was actually his parents, my grandmother, who actually later on came to faith, and they were the ones to share that this Jesus, Yeshua, who was not for them, was actually for them, and they ended up leading him on a search that led to his own salvation. We moved out from California in 2020. In fact, I drove out of California on the 4th of July, 2020. The pandemic is in full swing. And I say that that was my Independence Day from California. We left there and we came to the promised land. Not of milk and honey, but horses and bourbon. And we live in Lexington, Kentucky. And we decided, number one, I started a company with a guy named Donald Miller at Storybrand. And I help ministries all over the world tell their story. So ministries like Tim Keller, City Redeemer, Campus Crusade, you can look at every word on their website, and I've been able to write it. And it's amazing that the Lord, I think this is a story of positioning, that the Lord has positioned us in such a way that we just, by the sovereignty and grace of God, that we continue to be put in the right place at the right time. About 4 years ago, my dad and I started a ministry. He was working with Chosen People Ministries and as a missionary, and he said, "Let's do our own thing." And it started with this conversation. We said, every Jew in the world bought tickets to a two-act play. They went to the first act, enjoyed it, got up at intermission, grabbed a drink, went home, and never saw the second act. Well, every Christian in the world bought tickets to that same two-act play. They got there late, they passed the Jews in the lobby, and they saw the second act and not the first act. And so we get to stand in the middle and help tell the full story, the whole story to both sides. And it's interesting because being a pastor at a megachurch and being Jewish, I had all of these Christians in my church that were saying, "You're a pastor, but you're Jewish." And I'd have all my Jewish friends saying, "You're Jewish, but you're a pastor." And nobody knows what to do with those of us who are in the in between. And It's interesting because most of the Jews in my life would say, well, if you believe in Jesus, then that makes you a Christian and you're no longer Jewish. And to the Christian community, they look at us and they say, oh, well, you're a Jew who now believes in Jesus. So yeah, now you're a Christian. You're no longer Jewish. And so both of them, there's a push and a pull, but both of them are a removal of identity. And what we're trying to do is tell the Jewish people. In fact, I have this come up all the time. Christians will say, what's the number one obstacle for a Jewish person to come to faith in the Messiah? And I said, Jews don't want to be Christians. And so what we're trying to do is share a different paradigm. That we're not trying to make Jews into Christians. We are trying to educate Christians and let them know that they are Gentile followers of a Jewish Messiah. And we are called to go out to Jewish people and invite them to become Jewish followers of a Jewish Messiah. And if we can actually reframe that conversation in such a way, then we will actually see more success. And so we are. And so what we get to do is we get to stand in the middle, and we're trying to reach the few. In fact, it's one of the things here on this hat. You probably can't see it all that well, but people always say the chosen people. Well, why are you chosen? And we can go back to Deuteronomy 7. But it's interesting because if you look at the population of Israel, the Jewish people worldwide are 0.2%. 0.2% of the entire world population. And if you look at the landmass of Israel compared to the Middle East, it's 0.2%. And this 0.2% takes up all of the headlines, takes up all of the bandwidth, and all of the hatred. We're small, but we're probably the most popular when it comes to airtime on TV. And the question is why? And here's where I want to maybe land and just open up for prayer, because something amazing has happened in November. So about 7, 8 months ago, here in our studio. And by the way, my dad and I, we started a podcast called The Jewish Road. We've had Sebastiaan on, one of our favorite people. Have we had you on twice? Yeah. Yeah, good. They were both great. One of the things I forgot to tell you is just that most Christians, if we find a Jewish person we want to share the gospel with, first thing we do is we'll share a string of scripture that is called the Roman road, right? Romans 3:23, for all have sinned. Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. And if you try to share the Roman road with a Jewish person, you're going to end up with a dead end. It's a cul-de-sac, and you'll get stuck. And so the question becomes, how do we actually share the gospel from the Old Testament? Is the gospel even in the Old Testament? And that's where most Christians would say, I don't know where to look. They might have Isaiah 53. So rather than sharing the good news of the Jewish Messiah from the Roman road, that's why we chose the name, the Jewish road, is we equip the church to share the gospel. And we can look at the idea that we have sin is embedded, and we walk through what is the gospel message. And so we have passages like Isaiah 59, right? Our iniquity has separated us from God. We talk about the life of the flesh is in the blood in Leviticus 17. We talk about a greater Moses to come from Deuteronomy 18. Obviously, we can bring in Isaiah 53, but that is the Jewish road. And what I love is there's a third road. And that is when, after the resurrection, that Yeshua is walking on this road called the Emmaus Road, and he is sharing the gospel, essentially the message of himself, with these two on this road. And what is he sharing? He's not sharing from the Brit Chadashah, the new covenant. It wasn't written yet. He is sharing, says, all of Moses and the prophets. And it says two things happened to them bodily. Number one, their hearts were burning and their eyes were open. And so that is our hope, that if we can actually share that message with not and by the way, if you can share the gospel from the Old Testament, that's not just for the Jewish people. It actually works for the entire world. And so that Jewish road, and in the same way, if we can equip the church, then we're doing what Paul would say is we're magnifying our ministry by bringing it also to the Gentiles so that they can reach their friends, but also to the Jewish people as well.
Oh, yeah. So this last Sunday, we actually had our 20th anniversary as a local church. So I planted a church um, together with an Assemblies of God missionaries back in 2005, 2006. We opened the doors in 2006, and it was phenomenal. And it really looks like God's bringing healing also to some of the brokenness, that we've seen through the years. The stuff that has to do with your own immaturity and the immaturity of others, as you get involved in ministry. And it's really been amazing to see this. And one of the things that the Lord showed me, I briefly want to share it with you. It's actually in 1 Samuel 7. And it's basically this one. I was looking for this through Google actually, where it speaks about, thus far the Lord has blessed us. There's one statement, Ebenezer. And then I looked at the passage, and I noticed that there was actually a mention of 20 years in that same passage, which was really, I believe it was the Lord showing this. And but it speaks about a place called Yearim. I hope I pronounced it correctly. But this is where the Ark of the Covenant was hidden, basically, for a period of 20 years. And so it wasn't in the center of attention. It wasn't at the place where it was and where it needed to be, like the city of Jerusalem in the end. So it was hidden there. And the Lord really spoke to me from that passage, like what you as a church have been doing the last 20 years have basically been hidden, but it's now time to come to the forefront with this. God is, now that we actually get a good grip on this message that we've been talking about here on these prayer calls and on Sunday mornings and in all sorts of conferences, we finally are getting a grip on this, and the Lord wants us to go public with it. And I believe that this is also why God is going to open doors, and not just for me. Johan is sensing this already. He's getting some of those opportunities, and Mario, and there's quite a few of you that, obviously Matt and Ben, but there's quite a few of you that are getting these open doors. But it's because God wants to take this message that was hidden and bring it to the forefront. And so I really pray over all of you that God is going to use you as an ambassador of His coming kingdom, of the gospel, the kingdom message, and that instead of trying to hold back, that you actually have the boldness to share this and bring this out. God needs voices like ours. And I believe that this is why some of you have been very committed to these prayer meetings. It's a small group, but I believe the Lord is also shaping this in your own heart. And God's going to use you to walk through these open doors and to share this message and to really bring people back to the core, to the gospel of the kingdom, to the story, like this two-act play. This is really powerful what Matt shared. That New Testament Christians understand the Old Testament and how it's one deal, and the same thing for Jewish people, the other way around. And may we discover the full story of the two-part play and see God move in powerful ways. So I think it's prophetic, and it's a prayer at the same time for all of you.